Grief, you don't get over grief. You move on with it. I think that the memories become less traumatic over time, and the memories that we carry then become sweet and joyful. But when your mind goes back to that moment, you're going to feel that grief. And it's okay. It is okay. It is expected. Grief is love.
If you've ever been through it, you'll know how painful it can be. You'll know what it's like the next morning when they're gone. The little signs of them missing, like the pitter-patter of their paws across the floor, the sound of their tongue lapping at a water bowl, the warmth of their body as they try and scoot a little bit closer during a Netflix binge. A recent study from Maynooth University found that losing a pet can sometimes be as intense and as long-lasting as losing a person. And part of why it affects us so deeply is that our dogs get to see a side of us that no one else ever gets to meet. That playful, that gentle, that childlike part of us that only ever comes out around them. They give us purpose. They need us so completely. So when they go, there's a part of us that goes with them too. A part of us that existed only in their presence. And because dogs don't live that long, loving them means grieving them more than once, sometimes, many times across a single lifetime. Lisa Waggoner, my guest on the podcast today, has lived exactly that. She's a force-free dog trainer of more than 20 years, the founder of the Cold Nose College, faculty at Victoria Stilwell Academy, author of Rocket Recall, and an ordained animal chaplain. She's lost 4 young dogs, one of them hit by a car at a year old. Each one changed the course of her life and her work. In this episode, we talk about why losing a dog can hurt as much as it does, why the world is still so quick to say it's only a dog, and what that kind of grief reveals about the way that they were loved. This is Just a Dog podcast, and I'm your host, Nadine. Let's begin.
Probably should go get a box of Kleenex. I'm very teary-eyed right now.
Okay.
I'm writing about some really emotional things that happened with my dogs, and my dogs changed me, and so, I'm reflecting a lot, and I'm, searching through the entire emotional span of my life to, what was it and how did that change? It's been an interesting 6 years, quite frankly. I've been working on this book.
You've been working on the book for 6 years?
Yeah, yeah. So we can talk about it a little bit because it is part of my journey. I've lost 4 untimely deaths of my dogs, 2.5, 8, 6, and 4. They died. And with each dog, either my whole career changed or the direction of my career changed. But for the death of a dog, I wouldn't have become a dog trainer. But I started writing this book, 2020. And then it got too hard to write, emotionally challenging. I said, I've always wanted to write a book on my recall protocol that I use has been so successful. Let me just write that book. And did. And then came back to, this book and fits and starts, but now I'm really immersed in it, hoping that I'll publish it this year.
Let's start at the very beginning. I would love to
Absolutely.
understand more about your life. Walk me through your relationship with dogs. Where did it start?
Yeah. So my relationship with dogs, while I wouldn't have said this a couple of years ago, really started as an infant. I have photos that my mother took with English collies where I'm in diapers. And so these are well done portraits of me with these puppies. And I grew up on a farm in Southern Illinois, spent 5 years there. My father was a professor at Southern Illinois University, a psychology professor. And we lived on a farm outside town in Southern Illinois. And we had a no number of dogs, cats, goats, and my favorite friend of all, Pedro, my burro. So I think that instilled my love of all animals, but also my love of the country. I mean, I'm a country girl. Put me in the middle of 100 acres with nobody around me, and I'm really, really happy. So I do live on 17 acres, 15 miles outside of a town of 1,500 people, so really small. So my love of animals went there. Family dogs we had. I interacted with them, but they were mom and dad's responsibility. When I left home, married young, foolishly and very young, we had a dog trained in all the wrong ways. No formal training, but everything I did was extremely wrong. And when we divorced, I let my then ex-husband keep the dog. So I was animal-less for, um, a decade or so. And then when Brad and I got married, he brought 2 cats to the family, and I love cats. We'd had cats too, absolutely adored them, and we were living in Marietta, Georgia, and longed to be up in the mountains. We met whitewater kayaking, so we spent every weekend camping, packing, kayaking, and we're never in the city. And so we long to have this property in the mountains. When we do that, we'll get a dog. So fast forward, we have the property, we have no dog, we're not living up here full time yet. And I'm at a work retreat only a few miles away from our then second home, which is a little 100-year-old, barely standing up house. And this stray dog bounds out of the woods. And we think it's a bear or well, maybe it's a fox. And then this skinny, mangy dog bounds out of the woods and follows us back to our rental cabin. And I don't want the mangy dog around. We've got to feed her. She needs food. So everybody's rummaging through the refrigerator trying to find food for her. And I'm concerned about her, but we feed her and it's like, okay, that's done. Now we can get on to work because it was a work retreat. But she stuck around for a little while. Then she finally left, like, okay, the stray dog is gone now. A blue sky session after lunch out of doors where we're sitting and talking and planning and having lunch. Here she comes again. And there's talk about somebody's got to take her home. And my friend from Texas says, I would take her, but I've already got 2 dogs. Lisa, you don't have any dogs. You should take her. No, I don't want the dog. I swear, when I said, no, I don't want the dog, that's when she nuzzled up to me and put her head on my lap. And in 30 minutes, I was done. I'm like, this dog is mine. I'm taking her home. I can't leave her here. But how am I going to tell Brad? So long story short, I call him, say, you've got to get some food from the neighbors for this stray dog. And he picked the food up and they said, you better be careful. Sounds like you're going to have a dog. He said, nope, not having a dog. Well, when he found me at the end of the evening sitting outside in the cold autumn weather with the dog after having missed me for a little while, he was very wise and realized that we were going to take her home. So that was the start of having the first dog in our life. When we brought a second dog, it trained her in all the wrong ways with very harsh, not as harsh as it could have been, but, punishment-based methods, choke chains, pinch collars, alpha rolls. We brought in our second dog, an Australian Shepherd puppy. I wanted to do agility. Doesn't everybody who has an Australian Shepherd want to do agility? I had a friend who had become a dog trainer. She was doing agility with her dogs. Like, I want to do that. So I started buying books. There were no trainers here in our general vicinity. 2 hours away was any trainer. So I bought books. I wish I could tell you the books that I bought. I wish I could credit these authors, but I no longer have the books. And I learned about positive reinforcement training. Like, I can use food to train. And I started doing that. I saw Carter's exuberance change, his joy of working with me. I no longer felt guilty because felt like I was hurting him when I trained him. And he was about a year old. So this is 2001, 2002. We had just taken our first competition agility lesson with a trainer outside of Atlanta, and he was brilliant on all those pieces of equipment that he had never seen. We were just playing on them, introducing him to the equipment. He was brilliant. 2 days later, he tragically died. He was hit by a car and
No.
killed.
Gosh,
And I was devastated. He had been my refuge during some really challenging caregiving years for my mother, who had some mental health issues. And I was absolutely lost and in a depression for 3 months. Didn't realize that at the time. Friends, Brad was worried about me. I went to some really dark places. And when I woke up, I said, I'm going to help people learn that there's a different way to train their dogs. Never meaning that I wanted to be a dog trainer. I just wanted to gain some knowledge and help shelter dogs, maybe friends and family. I believed in education. We were nationally certified, accredited, advanced whitewater instructors. So we believed in education, even when it was just not our vocation.
Mhm.
And I was referred to a woman in Chattanooga who did instructor training. She had been the president of APDT, had no idea what all those acronyms and letters meant at the time. So I picked up the phone and called her and thought, well, I was a recruiter, so I was used to cold calling. Hi, Pat Miller. This is Lisa Waggoner. I've heard you do instructor training. Could I have lunch with you to learn more about it? And she said, of course you can. Well, then I learned who Pat Miller was. My gosh, what do you know? She was so kind and so generous and so grateful. And I poured my heart out to her about my grief, losing Carter. I launched into professional education. I took my first clicker training class with my now new puppy, an Australian Shepherd. We had already fallen in love with the breed and loved it. Like, okay, yeah, I'll sign up for this instructor academy. And the rest is literally history. It was so hard. The learning theory piece was so hard for me, trying to get those 4 quadrants of operant conditioning and then understanding classical conditioning and how that changed behavior. And I was just hooked. And then when we, fast forward, this is another piece of our professional and volunteer lives that we love. Brad and I were both volunteers, dog trainers at a prison dog program,
Yeah.
jail dog program. And so I felt like I was carrying on my dad's work. He had lobbied against punishment and beatings of inmates in the prisons where he was a chief psychologist and for positive reinforcement and true rehabilitation of prisoners. And I understood what he must have gone through. He died young. I was just getting to know him as an adult when he died. So there's so many questions I'd love to ask him, but he's no longer here. So yeah, but he lobbied for kindness and rehabilitation that works, kind, compassionate, considerate when an inmate is struggling. In the dog training world, so many people don't understand that there are emotional lot behind the dog who's having a behavior issue. The dog isn't giving you a hard time, the dog is having a hard time. And I think as human beings with children, we're beginning to, hopefully, people are beginning to realize that. And people in the dog world are now too. But there's so much training that is done merely to have your dog obey versus truly understanding what they're feeling. They're living sentient beings, and we need to see them first as that living sentient being and make sure that they feel physically and emotionally safe so they can learn or they can begin we can begin to help them change their feelings about whatever it is that causes them fear.
What was your impression of dogs as you were growing up, and how did that influence how you dealt with your dog or managed your dog?
Yeah, so that's a very good question, Nadine. And I will say that I just wrote this. Like when we took Abby to training for the first time, I thought, well, none of our family dogs ever had training. I mean, we all free ranged back then, bye to mom and dad. Dad had gone to work, bye in the morning, and in the summer, home when it got dark, and the family dog just trailed after us. So they were very well socialized. And so no training. I think there's a German Shepherd we had that probably went through some training, or my mother may have gone through training. They rehomed this dog to someone in the military, and the dog was then taken to do some work during the Vietnam War area. That's as much as I remember and know. But no, our dogs didn't have any training. But I learned through my parents the incorrect way of trying to house train a dog. In those days, at least in our household, in every household I knew, you would rub the dog's nose in it. What did that do? Exacerbated the issue, right? So I remember Rascal was my Schnauzer's name. He peed all over the house. Nothing I did helped that get better. And so when Abby came, we didn't resort to that method. And I will tell you, had no training. We did no house training. And please, listening audience, please say house training and not house broke or house breaking. There's nothing to break. The dog is learning. We're helping the dog learn. If we were told to sit on or go to a different place to do our business, it might be different. I mean, someone would have to lead us to the new place where, it would be safe to go to the bathroom. But we never had to worry. Abby had been trained before by someone somewhere. She had been loved. We believed that it was a vacation community where we were renting this cabin. And we believe someone came up on vacation, let her run free, as we did early on, let her run free. She was off following her nose. She was some hound in her. and they probably had to leave and couldn't they probably just left her there because she'd been as a stray a few weeks around that community. When we took her to be spayed, she'd already been spayed. We didn't see the incision. So someone loved her and cared for her. The morning after the first night she was in her home, when we picked up a leash that we had borrowed, she came right to us and sat. So someone had worked with her, and I suppose they had house trained her. She never had an accident. But we knew nothing about a dog's needs at the time. We were only focused on how to make our life better by having the dog not pee or poop in the house.
Funny that, isn't it? How much of our dogs' lives revolve around our needs. Going to your second dog, the stray dog, and your first border collie, did you recognize sentience in the dog and start to see the dog as having their own emotional inner life and experience?
I don't think I truly understood that until I was studying behavior in a professional dog training academy. I mean, I don't think I truly understood it. I mean, I realized that Abby, when I used some training techniques on her that I would never do again, of course, that were harsh, I saw fear in her eyes. So I did understand there's something more here, but I don't think I really understood as I do today. But I was beginning to understand this. She's not happy. This is not comfortable for her. And then when I saw the difference in when I working with Carter, I began to understand that. But when I studied that, that's when it really it opened up for me. It was like my sunglasses came off. I could see. I had sunglasses on. I could see, but then I began to truly understand.
Mhm. And once you started seeing, did you find it easy to convey and communicate that outwards to your network? Was there any kind of resistance? Culturally, what were you faced with? What was the norm at the time?
There was a lot of resistance in friends and family. I learned early on, I really have no family. I'm an only child and no one is I'm Brad's family. Parents were open to things we said, but we didn't need to explain anything to him. We didn't have children, couldn't have children, and our dogs were their grand dogs. They called them their grand dogs. They got presents at, Christmas and anyway, but in this rural area of North Carolina over 20 years ago, when we first had a dog, dogs were dogs, and dogs are meant to stay outside, many times chained to a doghouse or a barrel as their only shelter. There was a lot of resistance. We were the only trainers within over 100 miles that used positive reinforcement techniques.
Wow.
So we encountered a lot of resistance in clients who were not open to change. And
Mhm.
I tried a few times working with clients whose dogs still lived outside, but there was no way to make progress. There was no way to really make progress. So we would have people who would try our techniques for a while and then go back to a choke chain or a pinch collar.
Why?
But slowly but surely, that began to change. 7 vets in the area were referring to us. I had good communication. I let a vet know when one of their clients was working with us. We collaborated together when we needed to on behavior cases. And slowly but surely that changed. But more than anything with our clients, this is a retirement community. So a lot of people have come from other areas and retire here. Most of our clients were transplants, not locals. This is
Okay.
the socioeconomic condition of Western North Carolina is very poor.
Okay.
And so there just wasn't money in households to be spent on training the dog. So because of that, we did once a month ask the trainer sessions at our training center, free for anybody who wanted to come, publicized it, trying to hold community events where people could learn if they chose to. Started a column in our newspaper so that began to seep into the community. And now I'm really happy to say that we're not training any longer. We have 3 amazing positive reinforcement trainers in this area who are making such a difference in the lives of dogs.
Since you met Brad, you've been staying in the same place. Is that correct? You're still there. So, what shifts and changes have you noticed, and what do you think the reason behind that is?
I have noticed a shift in people respecting dogs for who they are and understanding that we're 2 different species, but yet we're almost entirely similar with our brains and our emotions, that people are beginning to understand that. And the evidence is people are coming to me. Still, still get a lot of get a lot of referral looking for someone who uses humane techniques on their dog. Yay, that's happening. Rare is it anyone who isn't already looking at their dog as a dog that needs help versus a dog that's giving them a hard time.
Mhm.
And I think the trainers in this area are also more understanding, very understanding of trauma informed care. Truly, not just changing behavior, but really understanding or trying to understand where does that come from.
Yes.
And no, your dog doesn't need to learn how to sit. Your dog needs to learn how to feel safe. And we need to help you gain the knowledge on how to help your dog feel safe. Yes, you want to love on this dog you just adopted and love and pet and nuzzle it, but your dog doesn't need that right now, perhaps. Right.
Yeah.
For your dog is fearful and shy and just needs to adjust to their environment first before we use our human affection in the way that we humans do, grope and love and nuzzle.
I have a Galga.
That's a Spanish,
Yeah.
yes, Spanish
A
dog.
Spanish Greyhound, yes. So the reason why I mentioned that is because I read that you are an expert in anxiety cases, separation anxiety, that type of thing.
I will tell you, and this is something I heard Sarah Fisher say. I know you know who Sarah Fisher is, right?
Yeah.
I'm not an expert. I have a lot of experience, but
Okay.
as Sarah would say, the dogs are the experts, right? The dogs are the experts. But yes, and I'm happy to say my dog has recovered from not separation anxiety, but isolation distress. And though I'm a certified separation anxiety trainer, I engaged the help of one of my colleagues who has the same designation as awesome to guide our case because I cannot be objective about my own dog. And it was the most beautiful experience. But I just decided to add that skill to my toolkit when we closed our training center.
Right.
We had the most amazing years and fun and built the business and made a difference, but we were in the red. So we needed to close the brick and mortar facility and went back into doing in-home work. Just about that time, I learned about Melinda DiMartini, who was then, the only person who was doing a program on training trainers to address separation anxiety. So why not? This is perfect time to learn a new skill. Um, and I loved it. It made sense that I would love working with people that required a long-term relationship and a long-term length of time in which that change happens. Though
Mhm.
begin to see changes very early on. Because I'd been an executive recruiter, and so I recruited senior management and C-level employees for corporations, and those were long-term searches. It would take, 6 to 9 months to interview candidates, find them, introduce them to the client. I called it corporate matchmaking. So it made sense that I would like behavior cases because I liked that interaction with the client and the dog over a period of time. And that's what separation anxiety training was.
Mhm.
Really just you're living with that client for the duration of time that you're working together. You know every little bit about their background and their life because it's important to know that for the dog. So I loved it, started doing the work and stopped doing everything else, just solely focused on that for about 7 years. Some of my clients are still my friends today. We're still in touch. I'm very thankful that that was part of my background.
Mhm.
And while I was very successful, I didn't want to work with my own dog.
Okay. Well, that makes a lot of sense. What were some of the misconceptions that you had about separation anxiety that changed once you learned more?
That it's not a quick fix. And I knew that any behavior change for people is not a quick fix, right? Something as simple as trying to lose a couple of pounds seems simple, but there's so much that has to change internally. I think one of the biggest surprises for me was in order for a dog to feel safe home alone, you can leave them no longer than the length of time that they have learned to be comfortable in. So, in order to make that happen, it's imperative that you suspend absences so that you never leave your dog alone. Could be if your dog, let's say, separation anxiety is attachment to one person, isolation distress is anybody will do. The dog just can't be home alone.
Mhm.
So you can't leave either one of those. You can't leave your dog alone while you're working on the protocol to help the dog recover, because then the dog, you've made progress. Maybe let's just say 2 minutes outside the door, the dog feels safe and comfortable. I'm not worried. But then if the dog gets stressed, then you have just set your training back. So helping clients understand the need to find care for their dog when they're not with their dog was my surprise, and then a surprise to every other client. And then it started to change. There was more knowledge being put out in the world about separation anxiety and understanding it, that people already began to find care for their dogs because they could see their dog was anxious. So let me make sure that, or maybe they could see their dog was just anxious and now destroying their house. We can't have that happen. So they would find care for their dog. So I don't know the exact percentage, but I would say probably 50% of the people who came to me were already suspending absences by the time they found me.
This is the first time I've heard of the phrase isolation distress, and it's kind of made it already much easier to explain my dog's experience because I only recently started getting dog sitters for her. And initially, she would cry while I was away. Like if I stepped out for an hour or so and there was a sitter here with her, she'd cry for a little bit, go lie down on my bed, and then she would find a way to self-soothe. And then eventually she'd come out of the bedroom and come and sit on the sofa with whoever was here. So that's a bit of a relief because I just kind of used separation anxiety as a blanket term for any display of anxiousness
And I
when
mean,
I'm not here.
even though I worked under that umbrella, that's what we call, I mean, generally it's spoken about, the term that's used. But
Mhm.
technically, separation anxiety is to one person. So if Keaton had separation anxiety, his attachment could be to me mostly. And so even if Brad were with him, he would still be anxious. But for Keaton, any old body will do, as long as somebody's, and now, he's fine for 3 to 4 hours, which is great.
I'd love to get to a point where I can leave Duna for a couple of hours, but yeah, even taking the rubbish out.
Understanding, every dog has different triggers, stressors, stress related behaviors to whatever pre-departure cues you're using. Say, learn to be comfortable when you've got a trash bag in your hand. Well, maybe your dog hasn't yet, but when you're going to have a short absence, like to get the mail, or you get in the car and leave. So
Yes.
a separation anxiety trainer that's where I was saying, we have to know everything about your life. What is everything you do? Oh, you go to the bathroom before you leave.
Yeah, well, I think it's the jingling of the keys and putting my
Yep,
trainers on. Um,
absolutely. And
yeah, because
even
she
before,
already.
probably even before that, I mean, Keaton knows when we take a shower earlier in the day and
Yeah.
we're in there longer, maybe I'm putting on some makeup that day. And he's like, oh, something's going to be different than normal around here.
Exactly. So I guess my main question around separation anxiety was just trying to understand whether or not that was something that could be changed, and is the word train the best within that
Training is
context?
not the best word, but it is what most people understand, what the general public understands, that we're gonna training in this case assumes we're going through a formal process to bring about change at the end of that process. I will say that, we really, in the right term would be behavior modification, because we are modifying a behavior, helping a dog become comfortable in an environment where they once were not. And yeah, training maybe not the best word, but
Okay.
it is a formal process that can be followed. Though you can't overlay the the design of the behavior plan from one dog to another, because they're totally different. There's no template that says we're going to go through A, B, C, D, E. Not going to happen.
Okay.
One thing that usually will happen, however, almost predictable, is that we're going to have a trough. We're going to have peaks and valleys, and we're going to gain duration. The dog's going to be comfortable for X amount of time while you're gone. And then all of a sudden one day, there's a regression. That's normal. Just like if you and I both need to lose 10 pounds, even if we followed the same plan, our progress is going to be very different. And we're going to have peaks and valleys. There are going to be days when things don't go well. things. I eat more than I should have. So separation and recovery from separation anxiety is the same way. They're going to be peaks and valleys.
Okay, that's reassuring. I mean, yeah, exactly. You'd have
And
the
the
same.
only dog who doesn't have a regression of some sort, a dog is normal if they have a regression. The only one that doesn't have a regression is a dog who isn't going through the normal process.
Okay, that's interesting. So,
Yeah, you can count on it happening. It's just there are peaks and valleys in learning.
yeah, as with any being.
Mhm.
So, you have written a best-selling book, Rocket Recall, and have you got the book there?
I do. Of course.
I thought you were going to show it. Yes, so a best-selling book, and you are currently working on another book, and I would love for you to tell me a bit more about that.
Recall is a relationship, not a cue. Is a cue, of course. There is a cue that, we attach to the behavior when your dog comes back to you. But it's building the way I teach it is about building a trust building process. We are not just a completion exercise. So
Right.
it's safe, definitely needed for safety, right? To keep our dog safe. But I want my dog to feel emotionally safe. I want my dog coming to me because of the good stuff that happens when they do versus the fear of what will happen to them if they don't. So my thinking is instead of getting my dog to come back to me, I want to be worth them coming back to. So that's what the protocol is all about. And it will teach you some things about behavior too, the whys behind it. But um, I wanted to start writing, and you found my blog post that I wrote after 2 years after Willow died. That's when I decided to write a book. Her death was so hard on me. All my dogs' deaths have been. But I wanted to write a book about her and because I hadn't written about her. I hadn't shared my grief and how much she meant to me. And then as I thought about writing that book, I felt guilty. I was like, how can I write about her when I don't write about the other dogs? Because they had a major effect on my life too, personally and professionally. So started writing that book, had written about Carter, my first Australian Shepherd, had written about his death. I had to relive his death in order to write about it and feel the emotions that I felt then. And I spent a couple of weeks in tears, just reliving that grief again and that trauma that I felt because of the trauma he went through and said, "Ugh, I'll just write another book." So I wrote Rocket Recall. Kaylee was my then 2-year-old dog. Yeah, 2 when I started maybe 3 when I started writing the book. 2 weeks after she's the subject dog in my book. 2 weeks after my book was published, she died unexpectedly. She
Oh,
developed meningoencephalitis, an inflammation of the brain. And so here I was so excited. My book was doing so well. And on the other side, just extreme ranges of emotions. And I couldn't write for a couple of years, Nadine. I'd had too much cumulative grief. I just was spent and tried to give up on writing the book. Why am I doing this? It's a lot of work. Just, writing I am a writer, I guess, but every writer will say it's hard for them to write, even the ones best-selling authors. But so the writing is hard, but reliving the emotions is also very hard. And I tried to give up many times and was in a car accident where I was laid up for a couple of months trying to recover and journaled every day. I'd started journaled every day. Why am I doing this? Why do I want to write this book? I just need to give up. And I just couldn't. I couldn't. It's like, okay, this is a heart project. I'm going to finish this book. This is my project of the heart. I need to get this information out there for me, if not for anyone else, because I felt that if I didn't do that, I would never have full acceptance. I started to say heal. I don't think we ever heal. We move on with that little hole that we still have.
absolutely. When was the
Yeah.
first time you discovered that? Because I would assume, well, at least in my experience, that's not dog related.
I don't think I really understood that until I went through an animal chaplaincy course. So in an attempt to try to grapple with this grief that was with me every day. No, it's lots of joy in my life too. I mean, I didn't sit in a corner and grieve all day, but it was like it permeated every fiber of my body. Two things can be true at the same time. I can feel grief and I can also feel joy. That was an interesting experience the day that I felt that, which is somewhere in 20 probably. But until I took the animal chaplaincy course, again, trying to grapple with my own grief, 10 months of studying grief and studying animals and chaplaining each other, and it didn't fix it, right? I was looking for a fix. And I think it was a Nora McGurney TED Talk where she talked about her husband's death. And she said, grief, you don't get over grief, you move on with it. Like, well, that really makes sense. So between that and the chaplaincy course, it's like this just is. I think that the memories become less traumatic over time, and the memories that we carry then become sweet and joyful. But when your mind goes back to that moment, you're going to feel that grief, and it's okay. It is okay. It is expected. Grief is love.
Yeah. So you've unfortunately had multiple experiences by losing your dogs, not just prematurely, but also just, yeah, like totally unexpected. How has the grieving process shaped you, and how is it different from the grief of, because I think you have lost both your parents as well, haven't
Mhm.
you? Are there any differences between the grief that you had for your parents and the grief that you've had with your
Yes and
dogs?
yes. Yes and yes. So the things that are similar is that the grief is different for my dad when my dad passed and then when my mother passed. My dad died young and suddenly. One day I was talking him to on the phone and the next day he was dead. My mother lived a long life and was ill, not ill. Well, yes, she was ill. I mean, she was just aged. Her body had given out. She'd had and was bedridden and in a nursing home. And so when she died, it was a blessing, right? It was her time. We'd had a good life. Through therapy, I'd mended my relationship and my feelings about her mental health and alcoholism and the things she went through. And the death of Carter helped me understand the pain she must have been in. So those things were similar. So a sudden death, no matter human or dog, has a different component to it. I won't say it's worse, but it's a different component because it is sudden. And depending on the suddenness, especially when the dog is young, there's that feeling of so much that was left undone. Look at all we could have done. So our older dogs, we had 2 dogs who lived long lives. Our first dog, Abby, and then Cody, who lived to be 16. We started to say Brad's dog. We each trained a dog, so we said his and hers, but they were both our dogs. But he lived to be 16. So the ones who lived long time, you're still grieving, but there was satisfaction in having lived a full life and all the years you had together versus a dog ripped away, during the prime of their youth, really.
Yeah.
My own personal experience and the personal experience of all my friends who have had dogs, when a dog dies, it's harder than when a family member dies because our dogs are with us and they're woven into the daily fabric of our life. Every moment worth either caring for them or thinking about caring for them, or at least I hope we are. And we can't go through our day without a reminder of where they were yesterday, which is untrue even about our parents. And I remember feeling that when Carter died, it's like, this hurts more than when my dad died. How can that possibly be possible? But yet it's true.
Yeah.
And we just talked about that. I just did a continuing education workshop through our chaplaincy program. Yes, it's very true across the board. Because of that, they are woven in, our dogs' physical and emotional life is woven in to our physical and emotional life.
I've done a little bit of research on this, and I also recently spoke with Professor Adam McClosey, who was telling me about attachment styles and
Love
attachment
him.
with dogs. He's wonderful, isn't he? Um,
Yes.
and what was interesting to me is drawing a kind of a line between attachment style and then grief, because for many of us, our dogs are potentially our first secure attachment. And so losing them it's almost like it seems like it cuts deeper in some way, right?
Mhm.
There's this kind of unconditional love, not necessarily coming from them, but certainly coming from us because of that
Yes.
symbiotic
Mhm.
relationship
Mm.
and being so in tune with each other. And I was also looking just last night, actually reading up on this. They were talking about oxytocin, how that's released when you just merely look into your dog's eyes. And so
Yes.
you regulate each other through that. You reduce stress in each other through those really small activities like just just looking into each other's eyes. I just thought that was so magical.
Yeah, it's absolutely magical, and then when I touch my dog or my dog, love it when our dogs sleep with us, and thankfully Keaton loves to sleep with us. When he crawls in bed, and he's usually between us, and then he'll reach over and he'll plant his chin on my ankle, that oxytocin just rushes through my body. I mean, it's like a lover for the first time touching you. It just floods my body. I feel so warm and safe and
Yeah.
yeah, so grief for me, and I think it would be true for other people too, that grief can deepen the bond. And it's okay for you to continue a bond with your dog after death. You can remember them. You can honor them. You
Uh-huh.
can celebrate their birthdays. You can remember the day that they passed. You can carry on that bond post death. It doesn't mean that you were mentally challenged. It means that you're mentally normal.
So how long would you say, I mean, how long is a piece of string, right? But in terms of healthy grief, is there even such a thing? It's so hard to know, isn't it? Because everybody grieves in such a different way.
Everybody grieves differently. I think healthy grief is talking about it. I think it's being aware of it. It's how do I say this? It's continuing to honor that animal while still grieving and carrying on with your life after a period of time, right? It took me 3 months with Carter before I could do anything that was some semblance of normal without having my thoughts go right to him or to my loss. We all recover differently, and recover doesn't mean it goes away. The medical model of grief says that you go through a period and you go through these 5 stages, which, is a fallacy. And yeah, I mean, you might experience all those emotions, but you don't go through 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and you're done. If one is worried about if their grief is healthy or not, then if you're unable to function physically in the world or emotionally in the world, then I think it's time to consider um, a therapist versus a chaplain. So as a chaplain, the word scared me early on because I was kind of like, ooh, does that mean religion? Very secular in my thinking, though I have a very deep spirituality. So it took me 9 months of our 10-month chaplaincy course to get comfortable with the word, but it's really companioning. We're with someone, being with someone, listening and provide while someone is grieving, allowing them to talk, recognizing their feelings, probing, for how they feel, but not fixing. And that's hard for me because I'm a fixer. I'm my whole life like fixer. So it's good for me though to remember, take my own personal advice. But it's a wonderful service and one that I didn't plan to offer. I joined the course, the program to address my own grief, never intending to really practice. And then after not volunteering for a while, for a year or two, after we stopped volunteering with the jail program, it's like, I just would love to give back in some way and talk with one of the vets, my local vet, and she offered the space for a companion grief circle. And so we started that 2 months ago, and such a need in the community. We had 14 people show up for the first session, and people talked and cried and shared photos. And it's such a safe place to grieve together and to learn from one another, um, that we're all affected, deeply affected by the loss of our animals. And but that's also incredible evidence of how much we love them.
From the 14 people that showed up, did you see any trends? I know it's a small sample, but like, is it majority women? Are they part of a family? Are they single?
Them are female. We had one male, though he's an employee of the vet practice, and he's interested in doing the work himself. He mentioned that to me the first time I met him. He was relatively new, year or two ago, and mentioned that he had wanted to start a grief circle at his old vet practice, his former vet practice. And at the time, I wasn't at all interested, but said, well, if you go through the program and you do start one, I'll be happy to help. Well, then, fast forward and he's now been accepted into the program and we'll start the chaplaincy course in September. And then we'll co-lead that together once he's out. But he was the only male. Women, most of them, again, we're in a retirement community.
Right.
Most of the people are, I'd say age demographic is 40 to 75, probably, mostly women. And I think women are more apt to be open and express their grief in public than men are. Though Brad went with me, and I learned some new things about Brad when he spoke up and shared some things. So even after 43 years together, I learned some things about my own husband.
That's so lovely. 40, if that's a long time to be together,
It's a
to have had
lifetime,
a
isn't it?
business, to
I don't
work
even feel that
together.
old, Nadine, like, "Oh my gosh, how did it happen?" 10. I was 10 when I married. 10.
You just blink, and time just flies. It's crazy. I have moments like that too, where I'm like, "Oh, I'm not in my late 20s anymore."
Mhm,
It's
mhm.
so bizarre. I have friends who also have dogs, and some of them have had friends of theirs who have gone through the loss of their dogs. I think unless you've gone through it, a lot of people don't understand the depth of that grief and the effect that it can have on your body. And then also how lonely and isolating that can be if your dog was your primary attachment, but also if the world around you don't really take the grief
Mm,
seriously. Because a
that's
lot of people just go, oh, it's just a dog, get over it.
absolutely, absolutely, and that is one of the main reasons I wanted to write this book, is to help people understand that all of the feelings that I had and still have are normal. There is so that type of grief is called disenfranchised grief, where it's not recognized. Get over it. Just a dog. No, you can't have time off work. There's no personal leave when an animal dies, but yet there is for a person. But the grief is usually deeper. So, yes, that's again one of the reasons I wanted to start the Companion Animal Grief Circle, to give people a place for them to honor their feelings about the loss of their animals.
That's really lovely. I guess that's a silver lining or a positive that's come from the loss, right? To be able to,
Absolutely. I think it is. The love and relationships that we have with our dogs, we mirror emotions. Um, we have to be present with our dogs, and they're present with us, and that when that is ended suddenly, or anticipatory guilt is also another component of a type of grief. When
yeah.
your dog is ill, or maybe your dog isn't ill, but you've lost a dog and you know how hard it was, and preparing yourself for the next time, and bringing dogs into our homes, risking our emotions every single time, because we are always going to outlive our dogs. So we know that we're going to lose them.
For a lot of people, that can be quite crippling. Nothing has happened, but the mere thought of it happening is just almost too much to bear,
Hmm.
especially going back to the whole primary attachment thing. What do you think it says about us as society that in 2026, for many people, their primary attachment is their dog or their companion animal?
I'm happy that people are focusing on their animals, but I think because of the way technology has reshaped our lives, that we have very little action. Most people have very little face-to-face interaction with other people, because building a bond and building a relationship with a person is akin to building a relationship with a dog. You need to take time. You need to make time. You need to be open to what the other person's needs. So I think, unfortunately, I think it says some very negative things about our lack of interaction with other human beings on this planet.
Do you think that there is a correlation between loneliness and the severity of the grief that one can experience after the loss of a companion animal?
Absolutely. I think those who have a support system with other human beings probably do have an easier time moving through experiencing that grief if they're supported. Right? If the other person or circle of friends are supported. And that's where I've been very, very incredibly lucky, because I worked in a community that is solely centered on dogs and animals and care and love of animals. So everyone in my circle of friends and work colleagues understood the depth of my grief. I didn't experience even one person that said, get over it. It was just a dog.
That's
So,
lovely.
but that is so different than what most people experience. Even my friends who are dog trainers, their spouses who are experiencing the same thing go back to work and their colleagues say, "Come on, it's been a week. Stop." So, yes, but
Uh-huh.
I think having another person, having a companion, someone who can help companion you through that grief, whether it be a trained animal chaplain or not, someone who can listen. Needs just someone to listen, someone to be there, provide that unconditional support that all of our dogs give us.
What are some of the practical and actionable ways that people can be more supportive when someone they know has lost their companion animal?
How can I help? Ask open-ended questions. What do you need? How can I help? Please don't try to fix. Try to approach it with more of a service mindset than a fix it mindset.
Uh-huh.
How can I serve you? How are you feeling today? Checking in, just checking in. How are you? Even if you don't see them in person. This is what my friends did for me, and it meant the world to me. A text, a call, a Facebook message, thinking of you. What
Mhm.
can I do? Yeah.
And what about a romantic partner, especially if you're both going through that grief at the same time?
I would say asking one another how they feel. Same questions. We can't suppose that our spouse or significant other feels the exact same way we do. So how are you? Same question. How are you feeling today? And be open to talking. I would say that generally speaking, it may be more difficult for men to talk than women, and be mindful of that. Again, with that serve, if even though you're in the middle of grief, right? More of a help me understand conversation than a fix it conversation. Because what feels good to me probably didn't feel good for Brad. And what I didn't understand about him that he talked about in our grief workshop or circle, he had survivor's guilt. He called it survivor's guilt because his dog, the dog that he trained and loved, lived for 16 years, and I've lost more dogs. So he felt guilty that his dog was living and that he could still carry on loving him. And then because he'd seen me grieve and the depth of my grief when our dogs got critically ill, and they lived about a week before they died because we were doing everything trying to keep them alive in a critical care center. He had anticipatory grief or worry because he said, I knew I was going to lose her again.
How do you process your grief? Has it been different for every dog, if you feel comfortable?
A lot of tears. Tears are good. Tears are very, very beneficial. And remember that tears come from the love, that you had. I would just say sitting with it, not trying to make it go away, and remembering, not trying to not remember. Remember the good times. Remember the love that you shared. Remembering the things that I feel guilty about. Carter's death, he was hit by a car early and we didn't have a fence. I didn't walk him on leash all the time. We were a dead end road, 4 houses past us. Like if we were trying to get a fence put up, hadn't done it yet. Because during the housing booms, you couldn't get a fence. I mean, couldn't get a surveyor out to survey the property lines to then put a fence up. If we'd had a fence or if I'd had him on leash, he wouldn't have died. So that's a fact. And so there's still guilt that I carry about that. And it's just a fact. But feeling that guilt, recognizing it, but not dwelling on it, right? The statement that I've heard time and time again about anything that we've learned that we didn't know. It's like when you know better, you do better. So yeah, we've got more money in fencing than we have cars because it's most important to us. We've got 7 fenced acres for our dogs to roam and run, and they're protected now. Or our dog. We're a 1-dog family now.
I've always wondered what is a suitable amount of time to wait, or whether or not that would be like, is there another type of grief around that? Is there a kind of guilt around that?
There is no right answer to that. It's what's personal for every single person. I will caution people when they've lost a dog and they believe their other dog needs a companion right away. I will caution them about bringing another dog in very, very soon because that dog, that animal who lived with the companion animal that passed may still be grieving. And yes, they may need another companion or they may need some time and space. Just like a person, if a person loses a significant other, a spouse, a person that they lived with in their own home, do we ever say, you need another person right now? You just need to
Mm.
have a relationship with another person. That's probably the last thing that that person needs. But yet some dogs may need that. Other dogs may not. So it depends. And something I'm exploring in the book that I'm writing now is, why have I chosen to bring a puppy in within a month after all my dogs have passed?
What were your reflections on that?
So when Carter killed tragically, the first dog, when he died, it was a fervent search for another puppy. I've got to find another puppy now. Right. Thankfully, it took three or 4 months to find one, but I was immediately calling breeders, looking on what I had online then. There wasn't much. It was early days, and we were still in modem dial up here in the country. But so I was looking immediately. The second dog who passed, I wasn't looking at all. Like, no, I didn't want it. But two different people, two of my good friends, one of whom worked with me, another one had taken all our classes independently about a week apart. They both sent me a link to a breeder who was going to have a litter of Australian Shepherd puppies. It's like, no, I'm not interested. No, I'm not interested. But then I thought, what's the chance that each of them would send me the same name of the breeder when they hadn't talked to each other? Like, thank you for looking for a puppy for me. I'm not ready for one. But I thought, maybe I need to listen to this. Maybe, universe, what are you telling me? And I did. And so the puppy didn't come right away. Gibson died in November and the puppy came in February, but still pretty quick.
Mhm.
And then when Willow died at 6, her breeder was devastated that she died and happened to have a litter of Australian Shepherd puppies on the ground. So means, they were almost ready for homes, but they'd been spoken for. But when we stopped to see her, she said, I had a contract fall through. I've got a puppy available. I can never replace Willow for you, but I can give you another puppy. So Brad and I kicked it around and said, well, I guess we should. Again, the universe is leading us to this puppy. And that was Kaylee, the dog in my Rocket Recall book. And I learned a lot of things from that. I don't want to talk about them here. I will talk about it in my book. But I had a lot of guilt when she died.
When Willow passed away or when Kaylee passed away?
When Kaylee passed away. Yeah. The umbrella feeling for what I felt was, for so long I compared her to Willow.
Was that masking your grief, do you think?
I don't know that it was masking it. I think it contributed to even a deeper feeling of grief and confusion. Like, why? Why am I continuing to do? I hadn't done that with my other dogs. I had felt guilty loving a new creature when I still had this love for the past dog. Again, two things can be true at the same time. But Kaylee taught me how to love again. Yeah. And then Keaton came soon too. Again, the universe delivered these opportunities to me. And for whatever reason, probably my heart needed that attachment. I said yes every time. I had a trainer friend who was checking in with me almost every day after Kaylee died, and sent me cute puppy videos and how are you doing? And she sent a picture or a video of these adorable Australian Shepherd puppies, and they were playing and roughhousing. And I was already, okay, I'm going to have another dog someday. So maybe I should take note of this breeder, and contacted her. And she said, no, we're not going to have any more puppies. I'm not a breeder. I'm a person who had 2 amazing dogs and decided to have a litter, and I will not be having any more. But I happen to have a couple of puppies without contracts. See, I know it's probably too soon for you. Yes, it's too soon. But why don't you send photos? The rest they say. So that's my current guy, who's just amazing. He was the puppy who dried my tears when I cried, missing from grief, listening Kaylee, physically, literally dried my tears. I was still grieving for Kaylee when we brought him home, and I would have grief bursts. And this little 9-week-old puppy would scramble over to me, crawl up on my face, and lick my tears.
I read somewhere, psychologically speaking, they absorb a lot of our emotions. Is that
so? I believe dogs sense our emotions. They can feel our emotions just like people can feel our emotions. Yes, tears are salty. Yes, someone could say, well, they just wanted the salty tears, from your eyes. I believe this little guy and our dogs, if we look deep enough, if we if we can be present enough to see the emotions in our dogs, that we can feel that. They understand. They understand when we're anxious. They understand when we're upset. They understand when we're angry. How can they not understand when we're sad and we're
Hmm.
grieving? Beyond the physical manifestation of sobbing and crying. But he's still, if I cry watching a movie, he'll scramble over to me.
How old is he now?
He's 4 now, almost 4. He is absolutely positively joyful because we're not grieving all the time,
No. Yeah.
but grief bursts are normal.
Uh-huh.
It's no matter how many years have passed. I can see my dad passed in 1984. I can have moments where I think about him and cry. Damn, Dad, I wish you'd lived longer.
Yeah, I have the same I have the same moments. I think sometimes, or at least, have you heard of Andrew Huberman?
I have not.
Okay. Andrew Huberman is a professor. I think he might be a professor at Stanford, and he had an episode about grief specifically. And what I found really interesting after losing my dad was learning from his episode, his podcast, how the neural pathways in your brain are still there even after the person in your life has passed away. And so your brain still thinks they're going to answer the phone on the other side. It still thinks that they are living their life, that object permanence, that they're just living their lives somewhere else and they're just not here. And so it takes a long time for the brain to adapt and realize that pathway is cut
Yeah,
now, or like build a
yeah.
new one, that kind of thing. So I imagine that's quite similar when it comes to our dogs as well, especially if you've got that kind of habit of having them around you all the time and you've got your rituals that you
They
do together.
understand us so well. They know what we're going to do before we do it.
Yeah.
I'm going to read you something if I can get through it without crying. But, one of the things that's was very interesting for me going through this chaplaincy course, while there were very secular, right? It didn't focus on any one religion or way of thinking, but we discussed how other religions and other groups of faith thought about animals. Like, do animals have souls? Do they not have souls? Did a lot of exploration. Well, that got me curious about different religions, and was talking to my therapist one day and said, "I'm so psyched about getting introduced to different religions. I want to explore some other religions. I want to go to, Jewish synagogue in town. I want to go to." And she she looked at me, knows me well, and said, "Lisa, have you thought about just sitting still?" So I've been sitting still a lot more. I'm not running around visiting other um, houses of faith, but I've gotten interested in more in spiritually curious, I guess I would say. And I landed um, under the umbrella of sacred feminine, studying the sacred feminine and what that means, and early scriptures long before the Roman Empire took over Christianity. But I have some oracle cards that were created by Megan Watterson. And this is a chapter on angels. And I'm not going to read it all, but the title is Angels, and I've Never Been Alone. This moment is the memory that it's often when we're at our most human, bereft, heartbroken, and vulnerable that the angels can finally be heard. This moment is a memory that the energy of love is the bridge between the worlds. The paradox in being human is that when we're humble enough to feed the depths of our grief, we are directly connected to the experience of how love never ends. We are directly connected to all the love that constantly calls out to us invisibly from within.
That's beautiful and it's accurate.
Isn't it true? Very,
Yeah,
very
that's so
true.
accurate.
Very,
Someone
very
said
true.
to me, I think when I went through my first grief experience, my first and only so far, I was saying, because when I lost my dad, it was unexpected. It was the same as yours, I guess, one day and then one day not. And I remember saying to someone, it feels like there's a crater in my heart, like quite
Yes.
literally, there's an actual crater in my heart. And she said, then then use this time to plant the seeds around the crater and learn to love living on the edge.
Beautiful.
I think of my heart now, it's full of flowers.
So lovely.
Yeah.
So
But you do
lovely.
you do get used to living on the edges of that crater.
You
Like
do.
it's not gonna, like, nothing's filled it. It's still there 4 years
Yeah.
on. but you just
Oh, I love that. That is absolutely beautiful. The way I felt, I was trying to think to describe the multiple experiences I had with my dogs taken away from me at such a young age. And I likened it to living in this on this beautiful planet, this beautiful land that I live on that's colorful and has full of all those flowers you just mentioned. And then I was just without knowing, obviously, instantly, I didn't know it, was snatched by an alien and transported to another world. And that world was black and white. It had no color. There were no smiles. It was like living on this gray planet where there was no human or plant life. Then over time, that garden started to grow. Little bits of color began to appear and became beautiful and joyful again. And just about the time it became beautiful and joyful again, I was snatched away again to a different planet that was similar, still dark, without flowers. And again, just as I became comfortable and the garden started growing and the color came back, it happened again. So my world literally became black and white. Like when I got up the next day, I could not see color. And then slowly but surely, it came back. And so I'm living a vibrant, cinematic, colorful life right now with Keaton, this adorable guy I get to share my life with, who brings nothing but joy to my heart.
It sounds like your life was meant to be lived the full spectrum of human emotion, it seems, with all of the tragedy that you have experienced and the loss. Have you ever gotten to a stage where you had to make the choice yourself?
To euthanize a dog? Yes. We did with Abby and with Cody. Our last Brad's dog, Cody, my dog too, as you heard me say earlier, was 16, and he had canine cognitive dysfunction, in addition to some really serious osteoarthritis issues. But it really was his canine cognitive dysfunction that caused him to just be totally uncomfortable and in a state of anxiety all the time. And we had to make the decision. It was Brad's got to choose because
Okay.
he was closest, but he agreed. I mean, I agreed. We knew it was coming, but yet there was a day where Cody's behavior was just so anxious and over the top, and neither one of us could comfort him. And Brad said, "It's time.
Okay,
It's
so
time."
he just knew.
Yeah, he knew. Brad said, and he'll tell me when it's time. And there was a moment where Cody walked up to him and just looked at him in a certain way, and Brad said, Lisa, I believe he's telling me it's time."
So
And
really tough.
thankfully, we did not have the ability to do an in-home euthanasia with him. It was as beautiful a process as it could be in a vet's office. But since then, they've added a new veterinarian who does in-home euthanasias. So it's a more comforting experience for the animal and the family when you can find a veterinarian who will do that.
And also if people have multiple dogs, sometimes a dog will just leave, go to the vets and not come back. How does the existing dog process that? Do they process it? Do they need to grieve? Do they need to know that that dog came to the end of their life? Do they instinctively know? Yeah, it's a bit of a tricky one. So, in your experience, in-home experiences would be the optimal solution.
It was for us, and I think it certainly has for many people. There's so much less stress on the animal, right, than being at the end of the life, no matter what is causing the end of their life. They're in the comfort of their own home, surrounded by the people they love, and your other animals can be there
Uh-huh.
if you choose. I mean, I think that's a personal decision. I think it's a good idea. We've had our other dogs present when our cats have euthanized and the other cats present. If they chose to be, we didn't bring them in to be with us, but we talked about this in our last grief circle. I've heard people say that they don't want that memory of having the dog euthanized in their own home, that they're not sure they could ever go in that room again. And I see that's a personal choice. There's no right or wrong. But I think if we can make it as comfortable as possible for the animal who is crossing on to the what's next, then that is our responsibility if we can possibly do that. So I would love for people to to honor that and give that strong consideration if it's available in your area. Some places it is not.
What would you say is something positive that you've learned or taken away from your experiences and relationships with all the dogs that you've had?
This speaks less to each dog individually and more to their species. And maybe also because I've experienced so much grief, that each dog who's come into my life, I have loved in a deeper way, that my bond is become stronger with each dog that's entered my home. That being able to see a dog for who they are and not comparing them to the last dog gives you further appreciation of the species and the range of emotions that each individual dog experiences, which has only given me deeper appreciation and love for the species. Yeah, so the bond has become stronger. I think that can be true even if you haven't, well, our dogs pass before we do. So it's likely if you're a dog lover, you've had multiple deaths, or will have multiple deaths during your lifetime of the animals that you've loved. And I hope that helps people love deeper, the next one deeper. It's happened for me. I never thought I'd have another heart dog. And yet each dog that's come into my life, I've opened my heart fully up to them, even if it's taken a little while, and I've loved them deeper.
That crack just allows more light to come through.
I love that. I have a question for you.
Yeah.
And for all your listeners, when you hear this, feel free to let me know. I'm in the process. This next book that I'm writing for years, I have titled it The Death of a Dog Changes You, because their deaths did change me. But then their lives changed me too. So what was it? Was their life that changed me with their lives? Or was it their deaths that changed me? Yes, both did. But I'm really considering changing the title to The Dogs Who Shaped Me.
I love that.
Because they did. Even my childhood dogs shaped me.
But would you reach for the book when you're going through a particular end-of-life experience?
No, I do. There will be grief resources in the back, but the book really is about my unfolding as a human being and a person, and how I was so clueless early on with dogs, and how each dog and experience with each dog changed me, subtly or dramatically.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm leaning more toward The Dogs Who Shaped Me. And the tagline may be A Dog Trainer's Journey Through Grief to Grace.
I think you've got your title.
Good. Thank you. I appreciate your feedback.
Absolutely. Well, we'll just invite everyone listening.
Yes.
If you have your own thoughts, please share it in the comments or reach out to Lisa directly.
That's great. Thank you so much. It's been such a joy spending time with you today. Thank you so much for all you do.
Oh, thank you. I think I just get to talk to really amazing people.
Yeah, isn't it great though? Yes.
It is really it's really special. I'm always very grateful when people agree to come onto the podcast, because I've only been doing this for about 7 months.
Oh, fantastic. I knew it was relatively new, but yeah. That's excellent.
So some really, really cool conversations. And every time I speak with someone, there's a completely new perspective, the new learning. And it's like your experience with your dogs. It gets a bit deeper every time.
Mm-hmm.
But I haven't had any conversations around grief or loss when it comes to our dogs or companion animals before until you. So thank you very much for being present for this conversation and sharing so much of yourself so generously.
You're welcome. I'm happy to do it.
Thank you, Lisa.